Great. All right, so okay, so presenting at conferences, and this is our now traditional Building Bridges logo that was designed by a student several years back. And so today, in today's session, we have Carolyn. So Carolyn, are you with us?
I am. Hello.
And there she is. And myself and Melissa and Greg, who are on our committee, our conference organising committee this year, and were also last year, and they're very seasoned performers at our at our conference, and they're going to give some tips on their experiences presenting at the conference. So, and Carolyn, you feel free to chip in at any point. So look, in our fairly compressed 1 hour session, we're just going to tell you a little bit about the format of the conference. I'm going to say just a little bit about structuring your paper. Carolyn's going to talk about presenting on the day and very importantly, use of Zoom. So we're in kind of unfamiliar territory this year. It's all, of course, part of the great challenges of our circumstances this year. And then we've got the highlight of the session, Greg and Melissa. And then we've got lots of time for questions and discussion, and there might be various questions you have about just the whole technical business of presenting Zoom. So just very briefly, format of conference and papers. And I gather you've already kind of picked up on a lot of this. So first of all, don't forget that date. So yep, all day on the 4th of November. So we're a little bit like the Melbourne Cup, which is always the first Tuesday in November. Building Bridges is always the first Wednesday in November, and an even more auspicious occasion than what happens on the Tuesday. As I mentioned, we're conducting it on Zoom. And this is an important detail, which I imagine many have picked up on, that the papers, and by the way, that term papers, some students can be a bit confused by that. So paper in this context just means the presentation. So you don't actually have to submit a paper. But that terminology, interestingly, goes back to kind of ancient times, pre-PowerPoint and even pre-overhead projectors, where at academic conferences, people actually largely read papers. They actually had a kind of prepared paper and they would read the paper. It was before we had all these kind of, audio-visual resources. So that's kind of why we use that term, but it is actually not a paper, it's a spoken presentation. And your paper will be in a panel. You've probably had a look at the program. So in the main, the panel will consist of 3 other papers, and that, as you may have picked up, is part of a kind of a general theme that kind of unites the papers in that panel. You will have a session chair, and they have the role of well, introducing you and the title of your paper, helping you to keep to time. So in the past, Carolyn's provided little squeaky pigs that that are squeaked at various moments towards the end of the 15 minutes. But
this time, people, it's BYO squeaky pig.
Right.
So we'll talk about that in the chair session on Thursday.
Yeah. But anyway, the session chair will make contact with you ahead of the conference just to find out about you and your paper so they can introduce you, and also to give you a bit of a kind of rundown on how it's all going to operate. Just sort of a general point, do remember the kind of nature and spirit of our Building Bridges conference, which is this idea of a multidisciplinary audience. So it's like across the whole faculty. So unlike other conferences that you may attend, it won't be really necessarily people working within your discipline area or kind of related disciplines. You might have people from very unrelated disciplines, and this might have implications a little bit for the way you put things together and the way you kind of explain things on the day, you know, to be kind of inclusive to this kind of broader academic audience. And I think finally, we'd just like to say, you know, really do enjoy the experience of sharing your work with your faculty colleagues. It's always just been a really great celebratory event, our Building Bridges conference. We're kind of not sure how it's exactly going to pan out and how our kind of sense of community is going to work in the online format. But anyway, it's really something to look forward to and really to gain from. Now, Carolyn, did you want to pop in and say anything at this point?
No, other than don't be concerned that we've discussed squeaking pigs. What that means, I realize we didn't probably explain that, sorry, is that when you're towards the end of your presentation time, when you've got approximately 5 minutes left, your chair will give you some kind of signal to wrap up. And often that can be a little sign, but we found we try to make it a bit of fun. So we had like a squeaky toy going off. So you'll be signaled at about 5 minutes to when you complete. So that's what that toy is for. So don't worry, there won't be a live pig in the room.
All right. Okay. So look, I'll just move on to my section about the structuring of your work, and just a couple of sort of caveats at this point. So because it's across the whole faculty, we're dealing with students coming from, you know, many different disciplines and working with quite different sorts of research paradigms. So, you know, we have to be careful about how much we kind of generalize any statements about, you know, how you should structure your work. And look, another issue too is that I know that presenters will be at very different stages in their research. Some will be, you know, it might be very early days, and some might be fairly advanced. So that's a bit of a factor as well. And perhaps the third one is that I know that some of you already had quite a lot of experience presenting, and others, you know, maybe relatively new to the game. So we kind of need to, you know, accommodate all this sort of variety in any of the sort of generalizations that we make. So I've started off here with empirical based research. So I know a lot of people are kind of working in these paradigms. And this is where in your research you have a kind of strong sense of, you know, there's a method, there's data, there's findings, and the research is sort of largely organized around, you know, those sorts of components. But what I want to say is that across the whole board, regardless of the research sort of paradigm you're operating in, this very basic hourglass figure, I think, is sort of relevant to a large degree, really, to all the sort of presentations. And for those of you who have been to my sessions in the past, whether it's abstract writing or whether it's research article writing, I rely very much on this, this simple kind of configuration, which is the sort of idea that, you know, you set up the context of your study. So you don't just kind of launch in and say, you know, the study is about this. You provide some sort of context for the study. You know, the heart of the presentation, or the heart of the research article, or ultimately the thesis, is the study, you know, what exactly you have done. And then the sections towards the end are somehow about relating the study to this broader context. So anyway, that's the sort of way that I like to kind of convey the broad sort of structure of, you know, so much academic work. So when it comes to empirical based research, this contextual material at the beginning is, well, first of all, an introduction to the issue or problem in the real world that you're dealing with. And then it might include some coverage of the research background, perhaps a brief overview of previous findings, and a very brief coverage of theoretical frameworks and approaches that should be. But look, this is all to think of in the context of, 15 minutes. So there's really an emphasis here on covering this stuff, this material quite briefly and efficiently. And then when it comes to actually talking about your study, look, it's really important to, I think, to introduce the research question. The research question, or, the aims of really just tell us kind of so much about, what you're seeking to do. And then coverage, very, briefly again, method or proposed method. So it may be that you are, it's really the early stages of your research. So it may be that you're just actually talking about a proposed method, rather than one that you've actually implemented. And that goes for findings too. So you may have some key findings to report, or you may have preliminary findings, or again, if it's really very early days, it may be just a sort of sense of, anticipated findings, or what you're kind of, looking to find. And then finally, some sort of sense of conclusions. I mean, I present really a kind of a range of options here. I mean, it may be that you don't have anything terribly conclusive to report at this stage, or implications, maybe the anticipated benefits of your work. And because for a lot of you, it's at some point in the whole kind of PhD process, it might be interesting to talk about next steps or future directions in your work. So that's really very much the kind of broad, generalizations we can make about structure if you're operating within those kind of empirical paradigms. So I just wanted to say something briefly about non-empirical research. So this might be people working in, literary studies. We've got quite a few students who are doing work by artifact and exegesis. But I do think for these other sorts of paradigms that this broad structure does apply. So again, I think you're introducing the issue, the broad issue that you're dealing with, some sort of sense of the research background, possibly theoretical framework. And then it may be that the kind of body of your presentation is really organized around, a number of kind of key themes or some key elements that have come out of your work so far. It may be that you just cover one of those, or two, or even possibly three. So yeah, the only way I can kind of present any generalization here is to talk about, sort of thematic material. And then again, the broadening out of things at the end into some conclusions and implications, etc. So what about timing? So look, it's hard to, everyone will kind of approach this sort of slightly differently, but look, clearly the bulk of your presentation will be around your study, I would think. And so that means you've got to sort of think about how you can sort of fairly, efficiently, cover these other sorts of areas. And, how much time will you allocate to these sections? And then the key question to how many PowerPoint slides will you use? So look, be very aware of this, and I think Greg's going to say a little bit about this later on. The real danger is that you kind of overload your presentation with too many PowerPoint slides. So it just becomes a bit of a kind of rush getting through all the material. I've actually got a sample of a presentation from last year, and I'll hold off showing that now. Maybe towards the end, I'll just show that as an example. But it was a really good presentation, and the student actually limited themselves to 10 slides, and I would think that you probably wouldn't want to go too many above that. So don't, on that score, just don't become a kind of slave to your PowerPoint slides that kind of force you to rush through material. Okay, well, I think that's, yeah, that's all I wanted to say on that score. So perhaps before we move on, if there are any sort of quick questions about all of that, including, you know, if you want to say that, well, what I've presented there just doesn't seem to fit at all with the kind of material and the kind of study that you're dealing with.
Hi, I was wondering if anyone can pre-prepare video, or is it's all live?
Yeah, you can pre-prepare video. We've made the offer in some of the paperwork we sent out for you to suggested you record it and send that on to us. And we've got a Dropbox, and we can keep it in the Dropbox, and then we can play it if needed, just as a backup in case people's internet crashed that morning. So yeah, we encourage live because that's kind of the experience of traditional conferences. But yes, we can use video recording if that's easier for you. So
okay, cool. Yeah,
just send an email to the HDR Conf email box and say, I want to do video, help me.
Yeah, some people, I went to DRS and a couple of people did some really cool videos that were, yeah, really cleverly put together, but yeah, not overly gimmicky, but just, yeah, really enjoyable to watch. So
yeah, and look, an easy way to record is just record yourself on Zoom. So open a Zoom, have a meeting with yourself and hit record. And that should let you just, and you can share your screen, etc., and present. That's how we record some of our lectures, because it's quite easy, and the internet, like the size of the file is quite small. So it's easy to email it on or put it in a Dropbox.
I saw a cool one where these two people were sitting out in a garden, and then they had kind of text floating in the air next to them. I thought it looked good.
Terrific. That would take me 18 years to do. But if you've got that skill, why not? Go for it. But the idea is we're trying to encourage dialogue kind of on the spot in this particular conference. But that's fine. If you think that the internet's not going to work for you, then, and you want to do a video, why not go the whole hog?
Yeah, and I think the whole sort of this new online environment that we're in, I think it's probably going to actually change the nature of conference presentations rather than just the sort of get up and the talking head. They'll probably be much more sophisticated in a kind of, you know, video sense. All right, look, if there are no further questions there, perhaps we'll move on to Carolyn.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions. Oh, lunch, hey. There's a couple of questions in the chat there. So will everybody be preparing a 15-minute video, or is everyone's presentation live? So yes, we've encouraged people to get one ready in case things crash, but you don't have to. It's up to you. But we prefer to present live. When do you have to decide if live or video? Basically, as soon as you like, as long as, if you're going to do it by video, as long as we get it by, you know, if the conference is on the Wednesday, as long as we get it by the Friday, I think that's an appropriate amount of time. So are we able to opt to use the video and not to go live? Yes, you can, but we would encourage you to try the live performance, but yes, you can. And with the video, is it just PowerPoint with audio, so you won't see the presenter? Yes, you can do that, whatever the technology you have at hand. But you know, ideally we would like to see you if possible. So if you could put your video on. but that is really up to the technology that you have to hand. Would you agree, Tim, or not?
Yeah, that sounds right. Mm.
Yep, excellent. All right. Okay, so I will take you through my slides now, and my mouse is not working too well. Oh no, it's working now. Good. So here we go. Okay, so presenting on Zoom. I'm assuming you can see my screen. Yep, and that is the one thing that you will hear across the conference. Can you see my screen? So we'll be kind to each other in regard to that. So there are a couple of two different ways that you can use the Zoom and deal with your slides. You can do what I'm doing and share the screen, and where the slides are actually on your computer, or you can email the slides to your chair if needed, and they can change the slides for you if you're a bit worried that the techie stuff is a bit overwhelming. And look, Zoom's pretty easy when you've used it before, but we appreciate people may not have used it. So you've got those two options. Now I'm trying to work out how to change my slide. There you go. So in order to share your slide, what you do is when you come into your conference session, you get the slides ready on your screen. So you can see in my slide here, I've got you can see my whole screen with all my slides down the side, and then I would click on from current slide up the top. I don't know if you can see that up here somewhere, and then that would bring me to the image down the bottom of my slide, which is just that first slide that I'm using. And from there, yes, I had some fun with some imagery this morning. So from there, you go into Zoom and you use the little button down the bottom that says New Share. So the minute you open up in Zoom, this is what you will see. Not me, but you. And you will see that little green button down the bottom that says Share Screen. So you can click on that. And then that will give you, and only you will see this, it will give you a screen with all the computer screens that you have open. So all the files that you've got open. So you can see on my screen here, I've got the Zoom screen. I've also got my slides. I've also got some little purple things, which are some sticky notes. I might have a Word document. So I have to go through and choose which slide I would like to share with you. So which file I want to share with you. So I'm going to share my slides. So I would choose the slides from that particular set of files that are on my screen. So I've circled that one, and it says screen 2 for me because I have 2 screens, but you probably won't get screen 1 or 2. You'll just get a picture. So you select that with your mouse, the slide that you want to, or the file you want to share. And then you go down to the bottom where there's a blue button that says share. Very clever. So you click that, and then that gives you this. You will see your slides appearing on your screen, and you will see then a little green message saying you are you are screen sharing, and then a little red sign that says stop share. So you want to stay on your share there. And from there, you can just click through your slides as normal on your computer screen, and that will let you share the slides and change the slides. So it will change, and you can always just ask the audience, can you see this? Is this a new slide? Don't worry about that. We all do it. We say we won't, that, you know, we'll just present, but we end up asking that anyway. So don't feel bad about that. So when you finish sharing your screen, or you want to stop sharing for a while, you just have to click stop share, that red button down the bottom there. Now, Zoom does some really cool things. You don't have to use them. Not a drama at all if you just want to present your slides. That's what I do because I don't trust it. I'm not going to mess anything else up. But the other things you can do is when you open that screen, you'll probably see something like whiteboard. If you click that, that will let you draw and do a whiteboard. So I'm going to be really rebellious now. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to try the whiteboard, and let's see what happens. So that's if you're wanting to present something. So can you see me drawing here? You see my little squiggles? Yeah, okay. So that's taken my slides off and I'm able to illustrate something now. So if you're one of these really cool design kids, you can actually draw on the screen and we can see that. And you've got all other options up the top there as well. You can do it with pictures, with colors, etc. So play around with that yourself and see if you want to use that, if it's worth it for you. It may not be if you are like me and you just wish to present your slides. Okay, and I'm going back to sharing now. Other things that you can do, you can also annotate. So if you want to make a note on your slides that the audience can see, you can choose the annotation button. And this is a very messy slide, apologies, but if I click that down there now, I'm going to see if I can do it now. Hopefully, oh, no, maybe it mightn't work for me, but yeah, if you click the annotate, you can practice making notes and writing on your slides as well. So now you also have the option of choosing your background, and you can see I was having a lot of fun with my costumes this morning. So in order to, what choosing your background means is that you can go from having your natural background, and apologies, many of you may know this, to having something a little bit different, such as this. Can you see the difference now? Yeah, okay. So I'm at the beach, woohoo. Or I'm on the porch with my dog right now. Or I'm very seriously at Swinburne. So there's lots of different things that you can choose, but we recommend, so that you don't distract people, you either use your natural environment here, or that you use the environment that did you see all of that? Did you see my background change? You did, excellent, cool. Not sure what I'm sharing. There you go. And so you can also use the background that we've created for you, which is a really cool Building Bridges background, which we will email out to you if we haven't already. So in order to here we go, in order to, let's get my slides back, to change that background, what you do is you go to, just trying to get the next slide happening here. Whoop. There we go. You then go to change virtual background, or choose virtual background. So that you just click that, and that will then allow you to upload whichever background you like. Okay, so you can then have the option, once you've got your slides on screen, to read from your presentation from your webcam, or you can do a kind of presentation mode where you've got in your slides some notes, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And we don't see the notes, we only see the slides. So I'll show you how that works. So if you go into presenter view, on your slide, if you're using PowerPoint, that's up the top there. If you click presenter view, that gives you the option of using some notes to help you read, so that you're not also talking to the camera, showing your slides and reading from your notes like that. It gives you the option of seeing these down the side of your slides. So you'd be seeing them kind of down the end there. So it's a bit of a tricky system to use. So you might want to give that a good practice if you're going to use presenter view. The other option is presenting to the camera with your slides going, and just having your work, which says Squeaky Pig, just down below you, so you can read and also talk to the camera, so that people are seeing the slides, they're seeing you reading. And remember, of course, if you're sharing your slides, you're going to be just a very small image in the corner. So you don't have to worry too much about whether you're doing this or not, because people will only see a very small image of you. So one of the tricky things around sharing screens is audio. So you need to think about how you're going to get people to hear your audio if you are playing audio from a website. So if, as part of my presentation, I have a YouTube clip, if I just play that YouTube clip, as we found out in one of our previous training sessions, hey Tim, not everyone's going to be able to hear that audio. So if you are going to play a YouTube clip or some audio from a website, you need to do a couple of things. You need to go into Zoom and select share computer sound. Okay, and there's a little click box down the bottom for that. Now, my advice on this is that test it ahead of time with a friend if you are going to be sharing audio through a video clip, etc. on Zoom. Make an email, make a Zoom appointment with a friend and share the screen, see if they can hear it, because it is a bit of a foible. It's easier to slip up on that one. But there are instructions online on how to do that. So another thing you may be worried about is, oh my goodness, I'm presenting at a conference. What if my internet dies? And I am the queen of the internet dying mid-presentation. Happens all the time for me because I have not very good internet. So there's a couple of things that we can do. Now we do if you've sent in a video, we do have the video. So we can actually just quickly open up the video. We've all got all the access to a Dropbox and play that. But of course, if you're midway through and the presentation and is kind of, in slide 6 and you've got 10 to go and the internet dies, it's going to take us a while to kind of get that video up and get it up to speed. So the video is kind of really only an option if your internet's not working that day. The reality is there's probably not a whole lot we can do. My suggestion when that happens, and we'll send out instructions around this, is to get out of the Zoom and re-log in and reboot your computer quickly, or just double check that your internet, or reconnect, exit from your internet and reconnect. Happens to me an awful lot. So I get out of the Zoom. 2, I turn my internet off, back on again. And 3, I then re-enter the Zoom. And often that's all that is needed because your computer's just a bit overloaded. But the important thing to worry is that stuff goes wrong. It's okay. This happens at all conferences. People run late. They miss their sessions. When we've done international sessions, we've had someone Zooming in previously, we had problems. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. What we can do is distribute around a video of you doing the recording if for some reason something goes wrong and you don't have your session being delivered, or your presentation being delivered for any reason. And as with all Zooms, there may be little dings, as we've heard now, of people coming in and out of sessions, and people coughing, and people making noise and movements and having little microphones and drinking. So we hear, happens all the time. What will happen there is the chair will keep an eye on the participant list and mute people as needed. We will recommend people turn their microphones off during presentations, but things happen. People pop in midway through, they forget, they put it on, they want to ask a question, they're kind of sitting there waiting. So the chair will go through and mute. So do not be offended if you are muted. I have already muted a few people in this session today. I was monitoring the participation list and there was a bit of noise coming through. So I just muted them. So you can just simply return that on when you want to ask a question if needed. Which brings us to what I do believe is my last slide. How will we handle questions? Well, what we'll encourage people to do is to ask questions in the chat, as you've been doing today. And that's okay to do that as the presentation goes through. I think it's safe to assume that most presenters won't be watching the chat when they're presenting. So that as you're presenting, it's okay to turn the chat off if you want to just focus on your presentation. It can be very hard to have all those things in the same screen space. And then what we can do is at the end of the session, at the end of your presentation, we will ask for questions, and for people to have the option of writing those in chat, or they can turn their camera on and ask you. So it may also depend on what the bandwidth is like on that particular session. So I think that's as much as I've got to say. So I'll have a check now if we've got any questions. Okay, what have we got here? Can you draw on your own slides? Yes, you can. Useful to have a few. Yeah, try to keep as minimal files open as you can. And I can see we've got some noise here. So I'm just going to mute someone. You will see this in action. Now, no offense at all, the person that I'm muting, but for some reason that's not muting. Okay, there we go. You can also have any background you want. You can use the Swinburne background. It's up to you. And what else? Other questions do we have here? Let's see. If you can't send a recording before the conference, can we still? Of course, you can participate even if you don't have a recording going before. No, there's no disadvantage for anyone sending a recording or not. It's just if people are worried about their internet, then they've got that option there. So, okay. And I've just muted everyone because we've got a bit of noise coming through. There we go. Okay, so I think I've covered all the questions that were asked there. If not, we can come back to those. Okay, I've handed over to Tim.
Yeah, well, I'll just actually hand it over to Greg at this point. But look, clearly from what Carolyn's saying, look, it's really a good idea to give this all a, really a test run. So you're feeling, you do feel, confident on the day, because you absolutely don't want the technology to sort of get in the way of, the really interesting material that you want to present.
And don't be worried. It is quite an easy system to use. And we will be having, I don't know, I didn't see it on my slide. I thought I put it in there. There may be another slide hidden somewhere that I missed, but we will be having a tech check day on the Monday before the conference, where anyone, if they want to test their technology, they can just email me. I'll make a Zoom appointment with you and we can just run through it and test it. You're not going to run through your whole presentation with me because I don't want a spoiler, but what I'll do is help you work out if there's anything that is not working, or if you want to run through stuff, we can check that. And we can also do, if we have time at the end of this session, which we may not, we could also do a quick, put you in groups and check your tech. But perhaps we should wait for the Monday before the conference. The Monday of the conference to do that. Yeah, just email me and I'll make a time. Happy to do it before the conference, of course, but maybe just know for sure that Monday before Cup Day, I'm available to check anyone's tech. Hand it over.
Great, yeah. And look, you've probably sort of gathered too, I mean, with the work that you've done online during the year, look, we have, this great tolerance now for things just not quite working. So just sort of take a, philosophical view of all that. And in a sense, there's kind of less pressure than, the live performance where, you really feel sort of under the spotlight. So, there's this kind of slightly casual element to the whole Zoom format. Anyway, Greg, yeah. So Greg is one of our great contributors to Building Bridges. He's been involved in the reviewing of some of the abstracts, and he's helped out with our Publish and Flourish Award, which we'll be telling you all about at the conference. And I've seen Greg in action. He's a very fine presenter. So over to you, Greg.
Okay, thanks very much, Tim and Caroline. You're very kind. I just want to quickly run through some tips, if you like. So one thing to do is to work out your speaking rate. So read 100 words, time them, and when you're presenting, just be aware that you'll probably speak faster. So your allocated time multiplied by your speaking rate is your total word count. I speak at about 125 words a minute, so if I was on 15 minutes, I've got essentially 1875 words to look after. An idea I found worked for me was to type up your talk, read your talk into a recorder, and then when you have the time perfected, make multiple copies of it. I then put those onto an MP3 player and I plug in a set of headphones. And when I was travelling to and from Swinburne on the train, I got to learn the talk. Then that helps you become familiar with it. The other thing that helps you identify ums. A lot of people in the speaking make ums, and sometimes your audience will count them, and that can be embarrassing. The second thing is try for a catchy introduction if you can, and make sure your talk has elements of your abstract, because otherwise people will think, geez, I thought this was going to be about such and such. If you can, try and have a catchy ending. People are going to remember the start and the finish of your talk, most likely. When you read your talk to yourself, listen for words that you stumble over. One way to do it is to mark up your script. I once saw a radio presenter do this. So he had a script and he marked it up, he bolded it, he underlined it, he highlighted it. So he knew where to, what words to emphasise. So the emphasis was always on the right syllable. The other thing is to talk to the chairperson, ask what and when the timing alerts will occur. So Caroline's alluded to that a bit, and there'll be the pig, but you need to think in your own mind when those alerts will come. So have a couple of copies of your presentation, send one to HDR early so that they have it and they can set it up. Normally, if you're going to a presentation, I take 2 copies on memory sticks, on USB sticks. It's wise not to try and access your presentation via OneDrive because technology's got a terrible habit of going haywire. When it comes to your slides, try and keep them simple. Graphics are an ideal way if you can present to those. So you don't need to worry about words, you're talking to an image. But if you need to talk to what's on the slide, keep it really, really simple. White text on a black background works perfectly. A lot of people have transitions and all sorts of stuff. Transitions can totally disrupt the presentation. Function beats style every time with a slideshow because style can destroy readability sometimes. You'll have people have all the weirdest colours going and you don't know where you are, but Caroline showed some slides before, black on white text, very, very easy to read. People can be distracted. If there's too many things on the screen, I got this mania for counting stuff. So when stuff comes up on the screen, I just start counting it. And I distract myself from the presentation. The other thing is if you're doing charts, use primary colours. The default colours, I think, in PowerPoint are terrible. So red, blue, green, really bold, standard colours. There's an app I've got running on my phone at the moment. I've got 7 minutes and this one is counting for me, okay? So that's how long I've got left. So it shows me. So that's called timer. And you can set the timer to your allowed time. And before you start to speak, hit the timer. Sometimes you are evaluated at these talks. I know in an early session a couple of years back, it was part of my evaluation. So as the instructor was saying, the quickest way not to lose marks is to talk to time. And if you run over time, it's really unfair to the people who will follow you. Because think about if you were waiting for someone to finish in front of you and they just ran on and on and on. It's just, it's not a polite thing to do. It's very distracting. When you're presenting, think about how you'll tell the audience that you're finished or are finishing. So one way to do that is to say, in conclusion, and then you go on with something there, or in winding up, I would like to add, or finally, or you can just come to the point and say, finally, are there any questions? And there's no need to thank the audience because they should be thanking you. Now, when it comes to fielding questions, I come from a PR background and I'm a bit of a control freak. So I used to, if I was talking about something, I'd create a set of Q&As. So I'd think about all the questions that people were likely to ask me and then I'd write an answer for them. So that it meant that when Q&A time came along, most of the times the question I was asked was the one I was expecting. The other thing is consider providing the chairperson with a couple of questions because the chairperson's got a job of trying to think up some interesting things to ask you. And I remember one chairperson I had, I said, look, you may not have had time to think about questions to ask me, but one of the ones is, why did you take on a PhD? And that chairperson did ask me that question. And obviously it's a Dorothy Dixer, as they say in political terms. I knew the answer to it. But so you can actually help the chairperson. And it's not, I don't think it's dishonest or anything. It happens all the time in political life. That it's a way of conveying information and guiding information in the direction you want to go. Engage with your audience. When they start asking questions, walk over to them and stand near them, and not to intimidate them, but to be personal with them. And that way, when you're looking at someone talking straight at them, to them, with them, it's more engaging, and it's a very welcoming thing. If you don't know the answer to a question, say to the person, I don't know the answer to that, I'll get back to you, and make sure you do get back to them. The other thing is, HDR audiences are on your side. They don't want you to fail. In a commercial environment, sometimes people want you to fail. In this conference, people want it to work for you. So that's all I've got to say. Over to Melissa.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Tim and Carolyn. That was great, Greg. Look, I think that Tim, Carolyn, and Greg have gave you tons of information. So I thought that maybe I would just share a little bit of my experience in with the Building Bridges. This is going to be my third time presenting. I presented the first one in 2018 when I was 3 months into my PhD. Not Tim, something like that.
Yeah.
And
very early. That's right.
do you remember you tried to convince me? Yeah. And well, I suppose that's part of what I wanted to tell you, because I suppose I've had the experience of presenting at different stages of my PhD. So first in 2018, when I was 3 months into it, then last year when I was about 1 year and a few months into it, and this time about a little bit over 2 years. So in the first time that I presented, you know, like I told Tim, I'm not sure what I'm going to present because I'm still trying to figure out my PhD. So a few of you might be in that situation. A few of you might not. But yeah, basically what I presented was my PhD research from a general perspective. And that included, I suppose, even I presented a few of the research questions that I was playing with and thinking about. So I started presenting just like an overview of the problem and why it was important for me to do this PhD research. And then what was my proposal about? So in very general terms, because I was still trying to figure it out. And then how I was planning on doing that research. So some initial thoughts on how I was going to collect data, how I was thinking of analyzing it, and then what were some of my expected outcomes at the end of the research. So I don't know if that could be helpful for anybody that's starting with their PhD. And yeah, so another aspect of my PhD that I know that a few of you are doing as well is that I'm doing a PhD by publication. So for my second presentation of the Building Bridges, I decided to present one of the papers that I was working on. So for this paper, I had already worked for over a year, and it was quite easy to structure because I structured it very similar to the structure of the paper. So the background, methods, a theoretical approach, methods, results, and implications for planning and for planning. So it was quite simple to structure it like that. In this case, for this presentation, I pretty much have an abstract and that's it. So you see all the different stages that I'm at, but it has been really helpful for me. I decided to do this, which is pretty much, I'm in my final steps of the research. So I conducted 30 in-depth interviews. I have not analyzed them, but having this abstract and thinking of how I'm going to prepare the presentation has actually helped me, I suppose, get through this following stage in my research, in my PhD research. So for this paper, for this presentation, basically what I'm going to present is, again, a general problem or the gap that I identified, how I addressed it, or how I collected data, And then I'm just going to hint into some of the preliminary findings that I found. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit of what I wanted to share. And then the other important thing with which Greg mentioned is that I try to keep my slides very simple and very visual with very little text and white background. So yeah, I don't know, I can show you a sample of one of my presentations if you want. Is that okay. So I don't know, can you see that?
No.
Not yet.
No,
So you press share? The
yeah.
share, yeah.
I can see it. Oh, show windows here. Sorry. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, so I try to, instead of using a lot of, can you see it?
Yep.
A lot of text. I try to do diagrams. I try to add tables, these kind of things, because it's just visually more attractive. And it not only helps the audience, I think, but it also helps me think through what I want to say and how I want to say it without relying too much on text, in the text. So yeah, basically that's it. You can ask me anything else. Yeah, thank you. Back to you, Tim or Carolyn.
Terrific. Thank you. And I think one of the important things to remember is not to cram your slide full of text, because it's just everyone's going to try to read it inevitably. And it's just, and you'll end up just trying to read it. So you're better off adding an extra slide and having that unpacked a little bit. Death by PowerPoint. I know Greg's you know, he knows much better than that to do. And we've had a lot of talks about death by PowerPoint in presentations.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some papers where actually the text is like really significant. So, you know, you may need to put up, you know, a paragraph or some sort of very significant quote or an example of data, you know, maybe from an interview. So whenever I work in linguistics, so we invariably include text on our slides. If I ever display text, I actually always read it. I just got to make sure it's not too long, but I think it's a bit of a kind of burden for the audience to sort of listen to you and to be trying to read the text at the same time. So if that, you know, if it's text that you think is really significant, you know, hold it and then read it and then talk about, you know, the significance of actually showing it in the first place.
Yeah, and the diagram or an image can be very powerful, you know, and if you want some of the key messages that you want to give to your audience can be much powerful if they're going through a diagram or an image rather than, you know, a lot of text. So that's also important to think. My supervisors always tell me, you know, keep it simple, and if you can use these kind of visual aids. But remember, always throughout your presentation, make sure that you're transmitting your key message or what you want your audience to get out of what you're trying to say. And then I should add also as well, which has been very helpful for me, I always try to present to one of my supervisors and share my slides before I present, because they always give me great suggestions. And many times between us PhDs at the Center for Urban Transitions, we present to each other as well. So that's also really helpful, because usually, you know, you get great tips before you present. You can adjust a little bit. Some things might not be clear, so it's really good to practice a little bit prior.
We're getting close to the hour. Look, did anyone want to say something very quickly about their experiences or any concerns or things they'd like to ask? You know, wall of faces and names.
And just use this as an opportunity to see it as a practice run, if you like, this conference. It's because it's a very friendly environment. So that's a way of, you know, of just kind of, if that's your first presentation, of doing it in a really really welcoming audience. And so I think the important thing is not to worry too much about the tech stuff. We'll all work it out. Sorry, Greg, you had a question.
Yeah, Tim, I think if you're going to read something from a slide and you really want to and feel a presentation needs it, it would be useful to rehearse what you're going to say and how you're going to emphasize it. Because one thing is to have the text up there on the screen. The other thing is to read it with a bit of panache and make it interesting for the audience.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, because you think those samples of text are kind of really important, so you want to give them some kind of, you know, justice in the way that they're presented. But minimally, you know, to see when someone flashes up, you know, a couple of, you know, quite long paragraphs and they start reading, it's always, it's sad.
And we do have examples that we can send out of more presentations if needed.
It's probably also worth mentioning to anyone who's presenting some sort of graph or figure, and any, you know, that perhaps show results, and any of those sorts of figures are always so, you know, abundantly clear to you because you've created them and they, you know, you imagine that they're all kind of self-explanatory, but you really have to sort of take the time out to explain, because it's so easy for audiences, and again, it's this issue of a multidisciplinary audience, to just completely bamboozle people with those figures. So take the time, explain, you know, what the x-axis is and what the y-axis is and what this particular curve denotes. Just think of that guy, Alan Kohler, on the news, the ABC News each night. He's always flashing up those graphs. What was all that about? I mean, sometimes he explains it quite well, but you know, these are key moments in your presentations where you're wanting to present findings. So it's just kind of really important to take the time out to explain nice and carefully and methodically. And it does, you know, that does take time. It does take time in your 15 minutes.
Just on that time factor, what's your estimate of how long it would take to create an excellent presentation? I know how long's a piece of string, but just in terms of to do it justice, what would you advise us?
Well, as a university lecturer who perpetually is running out of time, I find that it takes about an hour. I can put things together in about an hour. And that's for, say, like a half hour to an hour of slide time. So I try to give myself that. The one that I showed you, I put together in about 40 minutes. And you'll see from the times on there, I was doing it right up to when we started this presentation. So yeah, it's about probably I think an hour, but you know, start early and you know, give yourself some time to craft it and go back, sleep on it. You know, things will bother you. You'll want to change the image. So yeah, but I find that
there's to me 2 or 3 hours then for us.
Yours is only 15
I would
minutes.
say.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, in advance, take much more time, like start thinking about it and start, you know, making an outline and a diagram like a few weeks prior. Because Carolyn is an expert and she's done this many times. And this is, you know, this is like a special part of your research that you're presenting that you might not still be clear in some things. So I mean, at least from my experience, it has taken me much longer, you know, so I've started working on them like at least 2 weeks ahead of time, even longer. Doesn't mean that you're okay 2 weeks on it, but, you know, you can work a little bit, go back, think about it, because, 45 minutes.
Emmanuel, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a simple question. Okay, basing on Melissa. We have, some of us have done a lot of presentation as made candidature review, confirmation of candidature review, a lot of things like that. So what is the difference, like presenting a conference paper and such a presentation? Like what could be the difference? Like,
Yeah, so the difference, I mean, there are a lot of differences, but because we're all presenting different parts of our PhD, it all kind of has connections. But for example, for our COC, we have very specific requisites that we have to present, as well as for our mid-candidature. So they're asking us to present very specific things. So I just finished my mid-COC in July. And the panel already knows my project. They've read my whole thesis. They've read my papers. So what they were looking for very specific things in the presentation. In the case of this of building bridges, you've already presented an abstract to the committee. You have, of course, it can be tweaked here and there, but I suppose it's either you're presenting your whole PhD as a
like
project.
a summary, like
Yeah.
a summary of it. So we can.
Yep.
So
Sorry.
we can simply say like it's like 3 minutes thesis presentation, where you can just generalize everything and put them together. And then, because as you said, your supervisor have already seen everything, but this time you are presenting to different audience and different people from different fields. So it's just to generalize and be specific on what you're saying.
Yeah, Emmanuel, I think one difference is when you're doing your confirmation of candidature and those formal milestones, a lot of it's about kind of justification. You're really needing to justify to your panel the the methodology you're using, the approach, that you've read the literature. I think this is really a kind of more of a sort of a sharing of the, the really interesting work that students have. So in a sense, you're kind of teaching people of sharing, this. So do think of it as this opportunity. You've done this, really, interesting research, and it's just an opportunity to kind of get it out there and share it with people and provoke ideas and thinking around these, the issues that you're dealing with, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Yeah. And I just saw a question here about, Linda, that has just, that her presentation is just based on a literature review. I presented, I did a systematic literature review, but I presented that in a conference in England. And I was like halfway through it, like the analysis and everything when I presented. So again, I presented, I gave a background, the context, the problem, the gaps, why I had decided to do a systematic review, and the methodology, and then a few preliminary findings, and why the research, why it was important, why, so what? So then, give a little bit of an explanation of why is it important, and or what are the steps after, when we are still like we have not fully finished the project or a part of the research thesis. So yeah, I think it's great to present the lit review, because you are becoming an expert in that topic, and you're sharing with us what you're finding. So
Terrific.
I think you can overthink it sometimes too. One of the things is that when you get to the PhD, you are expected to have presented the results of your work. So I look at this as an opportunity to present some aspect of your work and get a brownie point for
it. Yeah, your contribution to knowledge is the notion that we work with. So yeah, you're making a contribution to the world of ideas and research. Okay, well look, we've gone fractionally over time. This has really been a great preliminary event. So yeah, look, I guess we'll wind up now. And look, for those people who have indicated their interest in being a chair, we've got the session same time on Thursday. Now, I'm just wondering, I'm not sure if MC is here, whether we actually have all the chair positions filled.
I think we might have 2 left. We've got about 4. I think we've got 4 chairs have responded. We had 6 free positions, 6 empty chairs. I think we've got 4 people who have agreed now. So I will do a double check. But yeah, we'll let you know if we need, if anyone's interested in chairing as a backup, or if there's 1 or 2 spots free, just let us know. And you can email on the HDRconf, CONF, at swin.edu.au email.
Oh, there's a message from MC. So I'm working in the lab.
Oh, that's okay, MC. You're not noisy at all. We haven't heard you. But good to have you here. MC has done some fabulous chair guidelines. So there you go. I have another meeting, so I have to Zoom off Zoom. So it's lovely to see you all.
Yeah, so it'd be great to see you on the 4th. Don't forget that date.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.
See ya.